How I describe something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about something generates my behavior. If you say you're too busy to meditate, that is the reason that you need to meditate. Every solution puts in place the next elements of your next problem.
Blaine, what's up? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing really, really well, Ben. Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show again.
What kind of results have you or people you've worked with seen through this process?
Most things don't have to be addressed right now. When we find ways to slow things down, we can actually find ways to be more creative. And when we get more creative, we end up solving an existing problem in a new way that guarantees it won't show up in the same form again. Every solution will cause a new problem. Imagination lives at the threshold of spirit. The mind can't tell the difference between a vividly imagined reality and an open-eyed experience of reality. The purpose of a goal is not to get something. The purpose of a goal is to grow. Content is king, but context is God. Scarcity is always in the forefront of a mindset of accumulation. Emotion is the human's way of expressing vibration.
What got you into meditation when you did? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
My very first meditative practice was
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome everyone to Learn, Speak, Teach, powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. If you love to learn, be inspired, and succeed, we're here to speak and teach. I'm your host, Ben Albert. I believe if you're not living, you're dying. If you're not growing, you're withering. And if you're not engaged, you can turn this off right now. Because we here at LST are lifelong learners. And listen, I'm not your guru. I'm an ordinary guy on a journey to learn from the experts. My goal is to host each conversation with a beginner's mindset. Learn and let the experts speak and teach their truths. Join us! Oh yeah, and don't forget to subscribe. This episode is brought to you completely free. Get some stake in the game here. My fee for the show only takes a few moments. If you gain value from the episode, personally share with a friend and explain your favorite part. Bonus points. Please leave us a review on Apple, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to the show. All right, let's get started. Welcome once again to Learn, Speak, Teach on the Real Business Connections Network. I'm here for a second time with Blaine Bartlett. Blaine, what's up? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing really, really well, Ben. Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show again.
You're calling in. I know we had a couple internet hiccups, so elephant in the room, listener, if something happens, it's because you're on an island somewhere, right? Where are you calling out of?
Yeah, I'm a little bit northwest of Seattle, on an island up here. So our internet is just a bit spotty.
It's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
If anyone missed the replay, I literally just replayed our first conversation with Blaine. It was Learn, Speak, Teach, that segment's 32nd episode. I wanted to have him back because of the amazing feedback. Everybody, literally just people love compassionate capitalism. Capitalism seems to be a dirty word in some people's minds, and you're refreshing, Blaine. So I wanted to have you back.
Well, I appreciate that. My mission in life is to change that narrative.
Well, let's change some narratives and let's get practical because again, guys, we got a little more into the story and the broad strokes and the soul of business in round one. Here in round two, I asked Blaine because I've been reading Leadership Mindset Weekly, tons of practical insights and tips on how to be a better leader. And I kind of wanted to just use that as a template and see where it takes us. I know you started the book talking about awareness. So as a leader who's leading self, leading family, and a leader in the workplace, we're leaders in lots of contexts, but talk a little bit about how awareness plays a role in our success as a leader?
Yeah, great question. There's a couple of ways that we can kind of unbundle that. First of all, if I look at some of the the seminal work that Dan Goldman did on emotional intelligence, study after study after study indicates that up to 90% of a leader's effectiveness is predicated on their emotional intelligence, the foundation of which is awareness. Awareness of self as well as awareness of others. And that word awareness, it can get a little confusing for folks because, again, back in my experience here, a lot of people will default to simply noticing things. I'm aware of the wind moving. I'm aware of, Tom and Jerry have got, a little conflict going on. I'm aware of that. But awareness in the sense that I'm using it from a leadership perspective is linked to something that I'm pretty passionate about, which is, the fact that everything has a soul that gives it existence. I guess that's one way to say it. A tree has a soul that gives it form, gives it existence. And I don't mean soul in a religious sense. I'm talking about soul in the sense that the Greeks, going way back to Aristotelian philosophy, it's that enlivening force that actually manifests itself in physical form in our lives. So with that as kind of the foundational predicate, the way that I define awareness is it's beginning to know, it's the process of noticing where the access to the spirit that moves to and through me is either opened or closed. That's how I define awareness. It's noticing where that access to that enlivening force, that creative force, is either constricted or opened. And when I look at it through that lens, it opens up all kinds of possibilities for me because I'm always defaulting towards aliveness. And that's, leaders cause movement. That's what they do. They cause movement. And things move because they're alive in some sense. Even a tumbling rock will move. There's some aliveness there over the course of eons, that translates into all kinds of different things around, literally a rock. But in organizations, just get real practical here.
Yeah, please.
Most organizations don't feel alive when you're around the company. It just kind of, it's this environment that is, people are going through the motions, checking boxes. I did what I was supposed to do and no more, really. So the idea of aliveness has to do with the experience of an opportunity to thrive, not just survive, not to just go along to get along. But do I have the opportunity to thrive? And if I'm looking through the lens of thriving, then I start paying attention to what's blocking access to that, because the behavioral analog, the experienced analog to awareness is thriving. That's what the metric actually ends up becoming. Are we thriving? Are we alive? And that's where awareness comes into play. And then, we look at how we go about creating that. What are the steps and what are the processes? What are the skill sets and competencies that we work with?
Yeah, I find in my life and a lot of people surrounding me, sometimes I do feel constricted. And how do we work that muscle, that awareness muscle? What are some of the practical action? You mentioned noticing. Is there a certain kind of thing to notice? What are some of the practical things we can do to work that awareness muscle?
Yeah, great question, Ben. A couple of things. That contraction is almost always rooted in fear in some way, shape, or form.
In my case, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, fear of what people would think if I said or did this, fear of, what might I look like if I did this or that, fear of I might fail. So, but that fear is a contractor. So the thing that we can do from an awareness perspective is begin to identify the source of the clutcher, the closing. And the way that we do that, for me, and this is just for me, is a meditation practice. I've been meditating for almost 50 years. And just the ability to quiet my mind long enough to hear a different voice rather than the voice of, oh my God, you're going to die. Yeah. That screaming noise. Studies show that we've got about, the average person has about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day.
Woo.
70 to 80. There's a ton of noise that's going on in our heads. And most of those thoughts are repetitive. They're repetitive in the sense of, I wonder what would happen if. I'm worried if. It's kind of like, God. So it's, small little things, but they are habituated thought processes that are rooted in ways that I've learned to be, that served me well at one point in my life, but they don't serve me so well today. So I want to quiet those voices so that I can hear, what does Spirit want to express today? What do I want to, when I grow up, what do I want to be? How does that sort of a thing? I need to be able to listen to that. One of my clients in Japan, and not surprisingly in Japan, they've got a meditation room in their office. It's, shoji screens and all that, bamboo tatami mats. And it's Japan. But the employees in the office, in each one of their offices, they've got offices throughout Japan. Each one of the offices has a meditation room, and that's used. People use it, because there's a lot of pressure. So I'm going to go someplace and be quiet for the next half hour. Don't bother me. I'm going to turn the phone off. So, I do this, 3 to 4 times a day. I'll just kind of push back, sit quiet, and it's no more than about 5 or 10 minutes. But I just want to stop the cacophony, stop the noise, take a breath, slow down, breathe. Now what's in front of me? What's the step next that I can take that will serve where I want to go? And now I can basically see what that step is, because I'm not distracted with what if.
Yeah, take the time to breathe, reduce distraction, be present even for the shortest moment.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned 50 years. I know this is going way back in the journey. What got you into meditation? Because 50 years ago, meditation wasn't a buzzword. It wasn't the kind of, nowadays it's hip, it's cool. It's a superpower. What got you into meditation when you did? Did you have a mentor? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Curiosity. Yeah. Basically, it was my very first meditative practice was in a Kundalini. It kind of transpired out of a Kundalini yoga class that I was taking, and we were meditating on our breath. And it really was one of the very first transcendental experiences that I have had in my life. I'd be sitting there just focusing on my breath, and then there was literally an out-of-body experience. It was a consequence of that. There was no drugs involved, no nothing. It was just kind of like I just popped and I was out of my body, and it was kind of like, well, that's kind of cool. And it was a consequence of being still, consequence of just kind of focusing. And that's what stillness does, is it allows for focus. And I was intrigued enough out of that I just kept going. Now, not religiously. There were breaks. There were times where I didn't do it, and then I'd come back to it and that sort of thing. And then I started studying a little bit around TM, transcendental meditation. What are some other modalities, meditation, ways. And I've just played with that for 50 years.
First off, fascinating stuff. This is amazing. For anyone who doesn't meditate, and in a business context, they have kind of the thought I just said, oh, it's trendy, it's goofy, it's woo-woo, it's what everyone's doing. But I'm a busy business leader. I don't have time to, sit in a room with my eyes closed, breathing, listening to the. You've already tackled this, but let's tackle it one more time. This can be a superpower. This can make you a better business leader, right? What kind of results have you or people you've worked with seen through this process?
Yeah. Again, I love your questions. One of the things that meditation. Now, first of all. I think it was Yogananda that said this. If you say you're too busy to meditate, that is the reason that you need to meditate. Because, life is always unfolding. And puts me in a position, because of its continual unfoldment, of either being reactive to it or responsive. So to the point of, what's the value of this? Why would I do this? I want to learn how to be more responsive rather than reactive.
Mm.
And Viktor Frankl talks about that pause between stimulus and action.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gap. And for most people, it's a gap that gets filled with reactivity, not thoughtful and mindful and intentional responsiveness. So, the Dalai Lama at one point was asked to adjudicate something, to make a comment about some conundrum that they were facing. And he said, I'm going to go meditate on this. I'll be back to you as soon as I'm finished. Mm-hmm. And he literally went away, meditated for about 2 weeks on it. Now, not every day, but I mean, it was kind of like people were waiting, going, I'm not ready yet. The answer has not appeared yet. Huh. And so when he did come out of his meditation, he had an answer that was holistic, that was generative, that was creative, and it was useful. It wasn't a reactive response to the situation at hand. What we think needs to happen yesterday, my God, our hair's on fire. Most things don't have to be addressed right now. They really don't. And when we find ways to slow things down, we can actually find ways to be more creative. And when we get more creative, we end up solving an existing problem in a new way that guarantees it won't show up in the same form again. Now, here's an interesting, for me at least, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Most people, when they are faced with a problem, they will look to the past, rummage around in their box of experience or their bag of experiences and say, oh, this worked before, and they'll apply that past solution to the current problem. And sure enough, solves the problem. But what's interesting is that the solution that I pulled out, that I used before, introduces back into the system that I'm living in the same fundamentals, the same dynamics that caused the problem in the first place. So what ends up happening is we end up with the same problem again. Names and faces have been changed to protect the innocent, but there wasn't really a creative solution. It was just a tried and true solution that doesn't move the ball forward. It just gets rid of the speed bump. Hmm. I want to be able to be creative in my solution seeking. Because a little known secret here, every solution puts in place the next elements of your next problem. Mm. And if you are pulling solutions that have always worked before, applying them to problems that you now have that look familiar to you, you're going to have the same problem again because you didn't change anything fundamental. We are problem creators. We are not problem solvers. Huh. Every solution will cause a new problem. I want to have my problems working for me. At some point in time, I want to see a problem that I've never seen before, that I now have to get folks together and go, what do we do here? How do we work with this? Let's get creative. That's when you start tapping into the soul, that creative structure, because it requires the use of imagination. And imagination literally lives at the threshold of spirit. That's where imagination lives. Once I tap into imagination in its truest form, I'm tapping into spirit.
Wow. I got a question about problems. But first I want to put an exclamation point. I know mutual friend JeVon McCormick. JeVon, I love it. Literally the same day as today. I haven't had the conversation yet, but he wrote Modern Leader, and his whole storyline is there's the old playbook that possibly worked, but the old playbook's not working the way it needs to for this generation. We need to invent a new playbook that misses the blind spots of the old playbook. And JeVon in the episode, I'll link it in the show notes, explains it way better than me, but we need to find new inclusive solutions because the old way of solving problems doesn't work anymore. It's been outdone.
Which is where we end up with crony capitalism, which is the capitalism model that most people experience today. And that capitalistic model is all organized around how can I accumulate as much as I can while I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mm.
And it's a model predicated on scarcity. Yeah. Yeah. Scarcity is always in the forefront of a mindset of accumulation. I've got to hoard. I've got to get more. I've got to get more. I mean, no, you don't. It's an abundant universe. You don't have to scamper after it. It's always there. So working from the mind, see, and this is what, boy, you get me on soapboxes here.
Let's go.
The idea of competition, which is rooted in our economic models today, competition by definition implies scarcity. There's only one winner. There's only one pot of gold. There's only, so scarcity. It's an abundant universe. There's an abundance of ideas. There's an abundance of ways to go from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Because somebody else is already occupying a lane doesn't mean I can't get inventive and create a different lane. There's a lot of different ways that this can work. But I start looking at competition and I start questioning, is it a valid economic model? Competition. There's studies done on Olympic athletes, and competition is present there. But it's interesting. Their competition, they're not competing against the other. They're competing with themselves. They use the other to benchmark. Where am I right now?
Yeah.
And it's the Olympic athlete's objective is thriving by excelling to be the best that I could possibly be. And it presupposes that there's an abundance of ways that I can get there. And I'm going to use my quote unquote competitors as ways to actually calibrate how best to excel. When we start focusing on accumulation, then we start polluting the pond. We start it's scarce information. I can't share it with somebody else. And if I can't share it with somebody else, the intelligence pool goes down, the knowledge pool goes down. And, all of these things start to come into play here. This is why compassionate capitalism for me is a counterbalance to, crony capitalism is so important. Because compassion is predicated on the experience of connection. And everything is connected. Everything is connected. Physics, when you look at quantum physics, when you just look at science, it's irrefutable. Evidence over and over and over again confirms that everything that we experience in the universe is connected in some way. Just the nature of entanglement at a quantum level.
Yeah.
You can go micro quantum or you can go macro astrophysically, but everything's connected. Everything is always in concert. So when we start thinking about everything is connected, compassion comes into play, and I start looking at how can I best, and this is where Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. The Wealth of Nations was predicated on the recognition of connection, and that if you're not winning, by definition, I won't be winning. If you excel, there's going to be something there that I can leverage. And so that reciprocity comes into play here. So that kind of a capitalistic move is something that we want to be able to orient and organize around.
Yeah, and environmentally, this isn't philosophy. This is actually science. The quantum interconnectedness is actually science. So I asked myself that question: why aren't we mirroring that connectedness in our business lives?
Yeah. The last TED talk I did was titled "Nature is the Ultimate Business Guru," and
I love that. Okay.
When you look at nature, I grew up on a farm, and I real early on learned that there is a symbiosis. Everything literally is connected. The seasons are connected. But when a tree falls, it looks like, oh my God, the tree died. No, there's still stuff going on. There's a lot of movement occurring here. And that tree in about 150 years will have decayed, but it's the nutrients and everything else that have come into play here have generated something else. Everything in nature is connected. And it's always, everything in nature also serves as a center of distribution, not as a center of accumulation. And it's that center of distribution that allows for nature as a free market economy to actually run pretty well. It's the only free market economy on the planet. It truly is. There are no artificial constraints unless man imposes them.
Sure.
And nature seems to thrive fairly well when man keeps his or her fingers out of the pie.
And we'll save the topic on Homo sapiens wrecking the world possibly for another conversation, because who knows? I had mentioned asking about, I could talk to you all day. I'm going to weave it back. And I mentioned I had a question about problems. Then we'll bring up a new topic. We were talking about, problems, and creating problems is actually a good thing. Talk about what some of the good problems to have are, other than, living on an island, which is a great problem to have.
It's a great problem to have.
Talk about some good problems to have, the kind of problems we should be creating for ourselves.
The purpose of a goal is not to get something. The purpose of a goal is to grow. And if I'm setting goals that are big, I will by definition immediately run into questions around, how do I get there? How do I get there? Yeah. Most people don't use goals in the appropriate way. Most people will set goals that they already know how to achieve. And most businesses will set goals that they already know how to achieve. We're going to increase revenue by 20% over the next 2 years. We know how to increase revenues. We do. We know how to do that. So there's no real growth involved in that. And as a consequence, there's no new problems that I can actually work with that will enhance my ability to be more effective. When I set really large goals that I don't have a bloody clue in hell how I'm going to go about achieving it or arriving at it, it will cause me to move into areas I've never been before, and I will encounter problems I've never seen before. So those kinds of problems can be interpersonal. Those kinds of problems can be structural. Those kinds of problems can be, just kind of fill in the blank. The kinds of problems I want to be creating for myself are ones that I've never seen before. Those that I've never encountered before, that I don't have an immediate, well, here's how I do this, answer to it. And if I find myself more often than not dealing with those kinds of problems, I'm probably going to be growing, and so is my organization. And it's going to feel alive because there's growth as a consequence of
the soul. The soul comes alive.
The soul is expressing itself. Yeah. The spirit has now a pathway to move out.
It's powerful stuff. I'm going to reel back in. So Leadership Mindset Weekly, I'm going through it right now. It's in the show notes for people to check out that book. Another big topic was context. And it's funny, I'm a marketer and we say it all the time, content is king. Well, if content is king, context is queen, because what is content if it's wrong place, wrong time, wrong audience, this or that? You can put out a bunch of crap and it doesn't matter. What is the context of your communication? So talk a little bit about the importance of context in your leadership and in your interpersonal conversations.
Yeah. And actually, for me, content is king, but context is God.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason I frame it that way is it has to do with the nature of meaning. Our behavior, everybody's behavior is organized around meaning that we've made up. I will behave in a manner that is consistent with what I think is appropriate or consistent or required here. And it's all about meaning. Okay. This behavior means something relative to X. Okay. So meaning is generated out of context. It's never generated out of content. It has to have a reference point. For the sake of what is this important? So a simple way to think about context, how I describe something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about something generates my behavior. Okay. That feeling structure didn't just occur. It's a consequence of comparison, contrast. Something occurred out there. I notice it, and that noticing has meaning to me because it's referenced against something, either past experience. I've seen this before and it wasn't good. So the context of good, bad comes into place. Or I've got a belief system that says a good person does this. So this is right behavior. This is wrong behavior. That context of right, wrong, oftentimes is very limiting. From a leadership perspective, I want to take good and bad, right and wrong off the table as conversational focus points. If I'm looking contextually at, is this working or not working? That's a completely different contextual frame that allows me to adjust behavior. If I go to right, wrong, good, bad, I introduce fear, contraction, and defensiveness. That's the wrong thing to say. That's the wrong thing to do. That's bad. People get defensive. They want to defend their position. And when people want to defend their position, movement stops. Yeah, you're not progressing. You're just dug in. So a question of, is this good? Is this bad? Non-starter. Does this work or does this not work? The context of working, the context of not working gives me a values-free assessment criteria or tool. I can just look at it objectively and go, that didn't work. Or, damn, that didn't work. Let's keep doing that until it doesn't work. And that context guides behavior. It determines what behavior is appropriate.
Talk about replicating the things that work, because I love the phrase, don't throw it at the wall and hope that it sticks. And that's usually someone saying, I have the perfect solution that does stick and everything else doesn't stick. But what happens when it sticks, and then it stops sticking? And it sticked the entire time, but now it stops to stick, and we're kind of like, we've already emotionally invested in the fact it does work and it does stick.
That's the whole fallacy of sunk costs. Yeah, I've already invested this much. I've got to keep going. Even though objective data says it's not working, you're not going to get where you want to go. Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book a couple of years back called What Got Me Here Won't Get Me There.
Right.
And that's essentially what we're talking about here. Every one of us has developed skill sets, knowledge base that work for us at a period in our life. When I was 8 years old, I had a knowledge base and a skill set that worked really well for an 8-year-old and probably carried me into my 9th year pretty effectively. But then when I get into double digits, 10 years old, oh my God, the context of what 10 years old, that's different than the context of a 9-year-old. So that context requires a different behavior because something has shifted. So when organizations begin to mature, Nokia, I spent probably around 12 years working with Nokia, the mobile telephone company.
Yep.
When I started working with them in the mid 1990s, they were an unknown. They were selling rubber tires, they were selling rubber boots, they had television sets, they had big cables, that you'd bind things together with. And they, by the way, had this small little telephony division that sold these little handsets. But it wasn't a big part of their revenue stream.
Yeah.
They reinvented themselves. What got us there isn't going to get us where we want to go. So they, Jorma Olela, who was brought in as the CEO at the time, and that's who I started doing some work with, said, we're going to bet the farm on telephony. And they started shedding all of these ancillary divisions. They sold the tire division. They sold everything.
I'm from Rochester. Telephony. I'm interrupting the flow, but I'm from Rochester. Kodak did the polar opposite.
Yes, they did.
Go on, please go on.
And that's an exact. You look at the tea leaves and you go, the world has changed. We need to redefine who we are. What worked before isn't going to work in this future state. And that is a difficult thing to do because things are habituated. People, they're boy, Ben, I can talk forever on this. Human beings have, early on, I used to do some coding, software coding years ago, but MS-DOS, when DOS came out, some of the early DOS programs Yeah, well, a lot of them still do. They had something that was called a TSR program during the boot up sequence when the computer booted up. These TSR, terminal stay resident programs. They would boot up, they would stay resident in the system, but they were critical to the operating of the operating system. Terminal stay resident. Now, why I'm mentioning that is human beings have terminal stay resident programs that get booted up every morning. Who am I? Where do I belong? Those are the two TSR programs that every human being has booted up in the morning when they wake up. Eyes pop up. Who am I? Where do I belong? Go to work. Who am I? Where do I belong? Well, I've got a title. I belong in this office. Yeah. You hear people say that's not my job. That's a consequence of this. Who am I? Where do I belong? That's not my job because I don't belong there. Who am I? That's not my title. That's not mine to do. All of these things come into play and they're never examined. So throw it up against the wall. It's always worked for me. This definitely the sense of self, this identity that I've created. Identity is just manufactured. We make it up. When I was born as an idea. Everybody's born as an idea. Actually, before you're born, you're an idea in mom and dad's mind.
You're a twinkle in the eye.
Yeah. And that idea gets manifested into the world. And now who is in charge of forming that idea? Well, for a lot of folks, it's somebody else, even until they're 80. I'm living somebody else's idea of what my life is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the way I work is, well, that's always worked. That's the way that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah. Nokia almost went bankrupt. As a matter of fact, I think they did file in the late 2010s, somewhere around there. Nokia is about 150, 160 years old as a company. Uh-huh. They have reinvented themselves at least 7 times that I'm aware of. They started out selling farm implements. Yeah, they were a timber company at one point in time. What got me here won't get me there. Nokia's just rebranded themselves again. So they are reinventing. That's what spirit creates, is a reinvention. Forms change.
What got me here won't get me there. Yep. To provide context, I'm going to ask a question about Blaine. My assumption, you can correct me, is you probably have enough capital and comfort that you're doing fine. You're not chasing the money train right now. Mm-hmm. So the answer is probably not going to be, I'm trying to scale to it could be, but now that you're here where you are, where are you going? Is it big picture? Is it fulfillment? Is it comfort? I think a lot of people don't realize that sometimes working less and just being comfortable is a good decision. In my eyes, I think it's a great decision. So my question is, where are you now? And where are you going?
Where am I going? Yeah. You broke up just a little bit there. Where am I now? Where am I going? No. We're comfortable. Yeah, we're comfortable. I'm gonna live on this island, and we've got a pretty good lifestyle, and all of that is fine. At this age in my life, I'm one of my grandkids asked me not too long ago, when are you going to retire?
Yeah.
And I mean, that question just is a non-starter for me. I cannot imagine not doing what I'm doing. Now I'm slowing down a little bit. That's fine. I don't need to get on another airplane. I don't need the miles. Yeah. And it is an and. I want to continue doing what I'm doing. For me, where I'm going next is, how can I have more impact? How can I continue to have broader impact? Mm-hmm. And it's not driven by monetary concern.
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say I don't like money. I love money. Yeah, and I really do. It makes a lot of things possible. And that's not the reason I do what I'm doing. I do what I'm doing because I think that I can make a difference in the world. I'm not trying to transform anything. This idea of compassionate capitalism, for me, and your listeners might appreciate this. I started about 6 years ago working off the notion of 1,000-year dream, 1,000-year vision, 1,000-year vision. Now, what's interesting about 1,000-year vision, and this is where compassionate capitalism started to, kind of take on a life for me. It's a recognition that, number one, it's most likely not going to happen in my lifetime. 1,000 years, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And it's important enough to me that I want to invest what I have, my life's energy, in having it be happening, having it be happening, unfolding. So what do I need to do today to make this happen in 1,000 years? Yeah. Now, what's interesting about that is it takes the angst out of it. It's kind of like in 1,000 years, well, okay, hit a little speed bump here. Yeah, okay, this is just what it looks like while I'm on the path to 1,000-year realization.
Wow.
Yeah, this is just part of the path. But it keeps me engaged. It keeps me moving. It removes disappointment. There's no possibility of being disappointed in the next 10 years because I haven't hit that 1,000-year mark. It just keeps and that's a context. 1,000 years is a context. Yeah. Everybody on this planet will be dead in 100 years. Everybody on this planet will be dead in 100 years. So I'm not concerned about, that. It's just going to happen. How do I want to use the time? For the sake of what? What will it contribute to in 1,000 years? In 1,000 years. I mean, are you crazy? No, it's 1,000 years out. The universe is, 34 billion years old. Hey, 1,000 years isn't that long.
Really not. Going back to that twinkle metaphor, even if you're just a twinkle, the twinkle leads to something else, which grows into something else, and you might never actually be able to experience the end destination.
Absolutely.
But a good friend and mentor of mine, Brian Bogart, always says there is no end destination. It's only constant evolution of self. Brian's a friend of yours as well. I see you nodding. But constant evolution of self. When we're done evolving and we're off, our soul leaves to a different place. There's no reason why what we built can't continue on. And I think that's the message, right?
Yeah. We plant a tree today knowing I'm not going to be able to sit under the shade in my lifetime, but my grandkids will.
Yeah. So we're not going to go through the entire book, but I had a couple things I had written down: communication mastery, commitment, trust. Let's pick one and end with, again, because each of these conversations, we could go on for 90 minutes on just one of these topics. Between communication, commitment, and trust, they're all important, but which one do you feel, what's coming up is what you want to cover today?
Yeah, out of those three, in the book, I go through, I've got a five-step model or a 5-phase model.
Yes.
Awareness, context, communication mastery, commitment, and trust. And these are the 5 domains that effective leaders actually work within. The ones that you identify here between communication mastery, commitment, and trust, I'm going to focus on commitment.
Yes.
Because most people don't understand the true power of commitment. And they don't understand it because they contextualize it in a way that doesn't particularly work well. Most people, when they think of commitment, they think of something that they are committed to. I'm committed to having this outcome. I'm committed to having this goal. I'm committed to realizing this lifestyle. I'm committed to this amount of money. Committed to, the language structure, committed to, it's outside of me.
External, yeah.
It's external. So I am committed to, as a linguistic framing, creates distance. Yeah.
You're gapping.
It's out there somewhere.
I almost want to walk out right now. You're creating so many light bulbs. I'm going to shut up. I apologize.
No. In fact, so where I work with the folks that I coach and where I'm actually, the executives that I'm working with is changing the syntax, changing the language structure. I am a commitment. And then I am a commitment to this lifestyle. I am a commitment. That literally I amness. It brings that external objective into me. I am this, which facilitates me then beginning to behave, think, smell, taste, walk, move, dance as if it's already happened, because it does live in me, and now it's just a matter of me expressing it. Where this goes to is a little meme that I've worked with. It's already happened, I just haven't arrived, whatever it is. Yeah, that compassionate capitalism dream of mine in 1,000 years, it's already happened. I just haven't arrived yet. So now my charter is just do what's necessary to arrive. Yeah. Yeah. One little step each day, one thing. It's in me. I am a commitment to this new book. I am a commitment to this healthy lifestyle. I am a commitment. That I amness. Everything happens out of that definition of I am.
Wow.
That's what true commitment is.
So true commitment's almost an internal affirmation of being. It's a state of being.
State of being.
That externally allows you to show up, but you're not showing up just to show up. You're showing up internal, and it's allowing you to externally commit to your team, your loved ones, your hobbies, your creative endeavors. When I hear commitment, usually I think, well, there's no commitment without something to commit to. So it immediately goes external for me. Like, I'm committed to my girlfriend right now.
Yeah.
Where does it come into play where you have the leading self commitment? How does that allow you to best show up in those external environments interpersonally with other humans? Because, we live in an external world. So how does that play out once you kind of build this?
It's most goals are set with desire as the propellant. Okay. So X is out there somewhere. I desire X. In the nature of desire is the experience of I don't have it yet.
Okay, yeah.
It does not exist in my experience yet. This I am a commitment basically says it does exist. It's just now a matter of expressing it, not going to get it. I now just need to express in a way that allows for it to manifest itself. Yeah, it already exists. I just haven't arrived. And it's the I that I want to take charge of. This is the self-mastery piece. I can't do anything about the external world. It is going to do the dance that it does. Okay. Stoic philosophy, Epictetus, the primary messaging in Stoic philosophy is, what can I control? What I have control over are very simple things. My thoughts, my beliefs, my behaviors. That's what I have control over. My thoughts, my beliefs, my behaviors, my feelings as a consequence of that. Everything else is outside of my control.
Yeah.
So this mastery of self really is an important piece of this, in large part because it does say, I am the universe. I am the field. Yeah. I'm a localized expression of the field. Yeah. And from that perspective, I can manifest anything, and I mean that in an almost literal sense. I mean, you go back and some of the old Indian fakirs, Muktananda. There's stories of him just opening his hand and there's a gemstone that appeared out of nowhere. Now, apocryphal. I don't know if it's true or not. I know people that have actually attested to that being true. That's an ideal state. It's not something that most of us will ever aspire or move into, but it illustrates the point that I am the universe.
Yeah.
I'm a localized expression of the universe.
So first off, amazing. I'm thinking this so I know other people might be. I'm like super rational and action oriented. I've always visualization as a concept has always been kind of distant to me because I can't just close my eyes and be on a plane off to it doesn't work that way per se. What are some of the action steps? And you could just tell me that I'm off the mark and just even wanting action steps, but what are some of the action steps to take who I am, my commitment, I'm already this, but how do I actually get there other than just imagining I'm there? Because I could imagine I'm president. It's not going to make me president. I don't want to be president, but
I don't know
does
why
this make
would.
sense? Is there a bridge that gaps this at all?
We started off talking about meditation. The idea of visualization, again, I think is poorly represented in most people's minds. Most people will tend to think of visualization or vision boards. They'll just see the picture. The law of attraction is a secondary law. It's predicated on the law of vibration.
Okay.
Everything vibrates. Everything has a frequency associated with it. All matter is nothing more than energy in motion. It's vibratory energy at certain frequency structures.
Okay.
When I'm visualizing, it's not just enough to hold the picture in my mind. I want to be able to feel it. Apologies. I want to be able
busy man.
Feel it. I want to be able to actually experience. The mind can't tell the difference between a vividly imagined reality and an open-eyed experience of reality. That vividly imagined is what I want to tap into. Vivid imagination. I can feel it. I can taste it. If I'm imagining money, I can feel the weight of the money. I can literally feel the weight of the money in my hand as I hold this pile of bills. I want to get the sensations into it. That's a function, or that's a methodology of moving my vibratory experience to a different plane. And once I occupy a different vibratory plane, anything that's on that plane becomes accessible to me. As long as I'm vibrating at a different frequency, what I'm going to have access to are those things that are present on that frequency band. So the challenge, and it is a challenge, and it's a problem that many people can actually engage in a creative way, is how do I raise my vibrational frequency? And it's an emotion. Emotion is the body's way, it's the human's way of expressing vibration. Emotion is a vibratory frequency.
Blaine, do you want to just take over this podcast? It's yours. I'm happy to have you back if the audience concurs. Tell us one more time, introduce your podcast and anything else.
People can find out more about my podcast. It's The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. And you can find links on my website, blainebartlett.com. There's a podcast tab up there. And I've got about 150 episodes up there right now, I think, something like that. It's published once a week.
All of it's in the show notes, guys. Send us a DM if you can't find something. Blaine, what a pleasure to have you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, buddy. My absolute pleasure. I love this conversation. You're a great interviewer.
Thanks again for listening to Learn, Speak, Teach, powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. You need to go subscribe if you haven't yet. This show is completely free. If you gain value from the episode, personally share with a friend and explain your favorite part. Leave us a review on Apple, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to the show. All right. Thanks once more for listening to LST. I am so grateful. Talk to you soon.